Glad to welcome back to the show Bruce Feldman of The Athletic and Fox Sports. Bruce, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Good to be on with you guys.
Glad to have you on as always. And, man, your Twitter feed just continues to be news after news and keeping up with it. And the latest is MAC football coaches were told 2 weeks ago that teams will no longer stay in hotels the night before games. That's going to cut costs, and travel rosters go from 76 to 70. And, Bruce, I think staying in the hotel, even on home games, is so important because you know your players are getting a proper meal, you know they're getting a proper rest, and you can continue to game plan. So this is just one of many things that the MAC's going through right now.
Yeah, the thing that I've heard from coaches both in the league and from coaches outside who saw my tweet about it said, you're talking about distractions and minimizing them. And one of the coaches in the league said, look, if you got guys who are in the dorms or, around student housing the night before a game, it's a Friday night, and it could be 2:30 in the morning, something's going on around them, down the hall. It's just not an ideal situation, but obviously we're in times where not a lot of things are ideal. As far as the cutting the travel rosters, coaches I talked to in that league, one of the coaches pointed out to me, he said, we didn't even do 76 guys back then when we could. So he thought that move was more for the optics. And when you're talking about maybe cutting some costs, yes, it is probably 3 less hotel rooms, but food-wise, he said it doesn't matter whether, it's not like you're just catering the meals for 76 guys. You're still basically banquet serving people like that in terms of like a buffet style. But it is a significant change when it comes to the hotels, and I think that's something that a lot of schools will be considering as costs get slashed in the face of all this that's going on now.
Bruce, when you look at the group of 5 and outside of the Power 5 conferences, when you look at that group right now, it seems like there's going to be a lot of cuts, a lot of changes for that group. Now, when you look at the Power 5, it doesn't look like it's going to necessarily be as many cuts, at least not right now and this far out.
No, I mean, that's the read I have on this too. But we're in such uncharted waters with this. I think the thing that's going to be hard to get a read on is how much changes are going to happen. It's almost like in stages of this, because the football money is going to be so significant, but also what happens if it impacts the season and where that lost money, impacts the rest of colleges. Not just that, but I think you have to keep in mind, too, it's going to impact the businesses around the universities. Who knows if we're going to have a full season, if it's going to start on time, if we're going to have fans and full attendance there. I mean, there's just so many variables here that nobody knows. I mean, I talked to some people around college athletics a lot in the last week about this, and one of the things that's come up is anybody who tells you definitively they know something's happening is bluffing or BSing you, because nobody knows. It's just, you may have a better read on things a month from now, but right now it's still too early to tell. The best you can be is optimistic, but this person cautioned me that just be careful how much stuff people are trying to tell you definitively, because there's just a lot of misinformation that's kind of floating around out there right now.
No doubt. Hey, Bruce, Gordy Rush, you've done a great job throughout this crisis. Ross Dellinger, another guy who's done a fantastic job. And the storyline I've been kind of watching has been, as you mentioned, the group of 5, the smaller, the mid-1AA schools. As Bowling Green has just announced that they've eliminated baseball effective immediately. That's 35 minutes ago. Now we're talking about Old Dominion Wrestling, Florida International Men's Track, Cincinnati Men's Soccer. We saw Akron let go of cross-country, golf, and women's tennis. To me, that's where the story's at. They don't have the power, per se, of LSU and the fundraising and being able to bring those things in on a football basis, or the huge TV contract. I'm really interested to see that, and especially the side point of, for instance, let's take Nichols down the road in Thibodaux, Louisiana. They're playing up here in Tiger Stadium. Scott Woodward had said, hey, we're playing 12 football games. But there's been talk, which, again, there's been talk, as you said, that maybe you don't get the non-conference games in. That would be absolutely devastating to any of the school like Nichols that depends on that paycheck to support the whole athletic department.
Yeah, you're right, Gordy. And I think what's really kind of a sobering reality to all this is just everything that's connected to those things that you're mentioning. I mean, as it relates to some of these cuts and some of these sports we were talking about, you talk to enough people around college athletics, and they'll say, well, some of these decisions were probably things that schools were probably leaning to doing. Now, not all, but some of them. And this gives them an opportunity to make some hard decisions and be able to point to a reason. Okay, this is why this was happening. We had no choice financially. But I think you're going to see more of a wave of this. One of my colleagues, Chris Manini at The Athletic, just did a story on Florida Tech shutting down its football program. And I do think I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to see more of those kinds of decisions, because they just may not have a choice financially as to where we're at with this. And I think one of the things, guys, to keep in mind is in the next month plus, how are these universities and the leadership around them going to address some of the protocols of what happens? Yes, we want to play football again. And yes, we want it to be on time. What happens if? What happens when there are cases, whether they're players or staffers, especially if they're staffers who are, we're talking about college athletes who are 18 to 22, but Nick Saban's almost 70 years old. Mac Brown's almost 70 years old. There are certainly guys on staffs who are over 60. The health risk around them is not insignificant. So I think those are hard questions that universities are going to have to really mull and decide, what do we do when that happens? How do we handle this best? Because I think one thing that's happened, just that you see, that may show up on your timeline on Twitter or you may see on social media, is everything feels like it seems to be black and white. You either feel this way or you don't. And I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. And I think that you got to be mindful of that. And it's like there's probably somewhere in the middle. I think the three of us all can't wait for college football to get back because we love it so much and we want some elements of normalcy, certainly. And hopefully we'll get there. But I think it's not as cut and dry as I think a lot of people want to believe it's going to be.
Bruce Feldman is our guest here on Hangin with Hester. Bruce, what do you think happens with some of those scholarships? You mentioned Florida Tech. I know they said that they will honor those scholarships for those players. Now, other schools, and we know baseball is 11.7, but there are some sports affected by this that are full scholarship sports. Will this be, hey, at the end of the year, you are done? I mean, is it going to be a school-by-school basis?
My guess is it'll be a school-by-school basis. I hope it's not what you just said, that it's like, hey, we're done. Because, you're talking about for a bunch of people, that is life-changing, what it can offer them. We're not necessarily talking about guys who are going to go be NFL players. We're talking about guys students, not just guys, who may not have the opportunity to continue their education because of what it means to their families, and think about the family ramifications of this. Because I'm sure. Look, I mean, I think we all have some connection in our own family of how our own relatives are affected by the financial aspect of this. I mean, I think of it with my own, in my own family and my sister and people I know who are dramatically impacted by the economics of this. So, I hope you got to keep your fingers crossed that things will ease up and we'll be able to manage around this better than it looks like we will, because, it's just, I don't know, it's just one of those things where there are no easy answers to it. And I think the projection, it's one thing to be able to project it. It's another thing to see, well, let's see what the reality is going to be like as this plays out. And, hopefully have our fingers crossed that'll it won't be as drastic as it seems like it could be.
Bruce, earlier in the show, we talked about Lincoln Riley's comments, of course, the Oklahoma head football coach, about the SEC, and he thought it was ridiculous that they are trying to get their student athletes back on campus for June 1st. Now, I know you're connected throughout the country with different conferences, different coaches. Do you think that is the majority view from other coaches outside the SEC?
I don't know if it's the majority. I do think there are more of them that feel more like Lincoln Riley Riley did, and probably more that felt like what Mike Gundy spoke about a month ago. So I think it's somewhere in the middle, to be honest. And I don't think Lincoln Riley's necessarily an outlier on this, but I think his comments are things that I've heard from some coaches. Now, I've heard it's all over the map, and it literally is probably all over the map. I'm not just saying like I think one thing that you'll hear a little bit of is people assume, it's only people in the Pac-12 who feel this way or whatever. I mean, Lincoln Riley's is from a small town in Texas and he coaches in Oklahoma. That's definitely not the same perception that I think people have of, this is a Pac-12 mindset or anything like that. And I also know coaches in the Big Ten who probably feel similar, or privately probably said something similar to what Lincoln Riley said. But right now, I think again, what I've heard a lot this week is, where are we going to be at a month from now? And what somebody explained to me earlier, maybe it was early last week, was people look at these models and they talk about, hey, you don't listen to this person or listen to that person. Well, these scientists are wrong. And one of the people explained to me, he said, listen, this is not like a weather forecast where it's like, okay, you're going to have a tornado or you're going to have a snowstorm. Well, whatever the three of us do tomorrow or, like on our own, does not affect whether our town is going to get a snowstorm or a tornado or rain or sun. There is no connection to that. But in the case of some of this and how people handle it, whether there's more testing, whether people are out and about, and how, whether they're wearing masks or not masks, I mean, those things do seem to have an impact on it. So what's going to happen because where I live in California, people are easing the restrictions and people are going out. Like, people can go near the beach and do some things now that some of these things are eased up. So what's going to be, like this? I mean, we don't know, I think we got to see, and it's not going to be something you're going to know about instantly. It may take a month to see how this thing shakes out. I got my fingers crossed that it's not, we're not going to have significant outbreak. And I'm not talking about like the numbers like New York City has. I'm talking about like the numbers like you may see in Michigan, or certainly, the folks in Louisiana, especially around New Orleans. I know, from talking to people I know connected to LSU, that it really impacted some of their families, and it's heartbreaking to hear that. So, hopefully it will not be as bad as it was. And if it's not, then great. Then I think things will operate on time. But right now, it's not like, and I think this may be Lincoln Riley's point, it's not like things had to happen, on this accelerated clock. We can still have a season on time if things are in good shape a month from now, and then players can report and go on like that. But obviously it's a mindset of when people can get ready and thinking about those things. And I think for everybody else, I think they're not on the same time clock, it seems like.
Bruce, real quick before we let you go, of course, we're catching up with Bruce Feldman here on Hangin with Hester. The Pac-12 situation is fascinating to me, with California having 4 institutions in that state. A border state, Arizona, has Arizona and Arizona State ready to go in the Pac-12. Is there any way that you could see the Pac-12 moving forward and the California teams having to alter what they do?
I could see them moving forward where, the season starts like normally. I do think there's been some confusion, and social media has definitely escalated this on what's going to happen in the state of California. I think there were some things that got reported and then, it got walked back a day later. And a lot of times, this is unfortunate, but this is the way it seems like it works with social media. Is something gets put out there, everybody just gets it retweeted onto their timeline, and then people just speak on it, and then all of a sudden it's just kind of the game of pass it on. If things, like I said, I live in Los Angeles, things are not as, shut down in that regard as maybe the perception is, like I said, and some of the things, of the realities of your day to day. So could things be lined up in time where there's games? Yeah, I think there could be. but it all depends on what the numbers look like in the next month, 6 weeks from now. And I think that's what the Pac-12 has really got to sort through. Now, there's definitely a difference in the leadership in terms of what the governor of California says compared to what the governor of Arizona is saying. But right now, I'm not sure how much that really matters right now. I think it's going to matter a month from now. But in terms of that, I mean, look, I'm hoping nothing bad happens in Arizona if things, get centralized there in the short term. But at this point, I think it's the key time. Key time is really mid to late June, as opposed to early mid-May right now. At least for college football and out here on the West Coast.
All right, he is Bruce Feldman, does a fantastic job at The Athletic as well as Fox Sports. Bruce, always appreciate the time.
My pleasure. Great to talk to you guys. Take care.